Hello, boxing fans. How are you doing? Welcome to episode number 384 of the Neutral Corner Boxing Podcast. I am your host, Michael Montero. And today we have much to discuss and catch up on. We're going to talk about the big fight card we saw in Riyadh Saturday, what we learned, and then we're going to talk about a fight card coming up in a couple weeks that a lot of you are excited about. We're also going to talk about some Canelo Alvarez pound for pound list talk. That's always fun. And then, of course, we got Jake Paul, Anthony Joshua. Anything else you guys want to discuss is on the table, so just let me know. And we'll get right into it, man. Man, where do I start? Where do I start? There's so much freaking going on. First comment here from my man Thomas Savage. He says, I learned 15 pints into the day that was too many to manage. I got home to watch the fights, forgot all about my Indian takeaway I had, never mind the fight card. Sounds like you had a hell of a Saturday there, Thomas. What'd you order? Did you get some tandoori chicken, some chicken chetanad, some garlic naan? I freaking love Indian food, man. I love the spice. There's actually a lot of Indian people in Atlanta where I live now. There's a lot of great Indian restaurants. There's a very large Indian population. So we get some great Indian food, like right up the street here from where we live. And best chicken chetanad I've ever had is literally, I don't even know if it's a mile, maybe a mile and a half from my place. So anyway, hope that you eventually got to your Indian takeaway, my friend, and you soaked up all the alcohol. Let's see. Marquise, what's up, man? Marquise in the chat said, I learned that my nose is to be protected at all times. Uh-oh. That sounds bad. I need to hear the rest of the story, Marquise. You need to, because that could go a few different ways. I don't know what you're talking about 100%. You need to add a little more context there. Gav Bridges, what's up, Gav? He says, that's English style, Mike. You want to try it sometime? Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. I can't wait to get over to the UK one day, man. One of these days when my girls are a little bit older and we can travel internationally, take them on a long flight. I just would not be comfortable doing that right now. Okay, let's start with the Canelo pound for pound stuff, and we'll let you guys get in on the chat. Phone lines are open, but as everyone I should state, I came online about 15 minutes earlier than scheduled. I just got my daughters up from their nap, and my wife's got them now. She's watching them for like the next hour, then we'll do dinner. They've been sick, they have strep throat. It's been a hell of a weekend into this week. But we're surviving. So we were going to travel for the Thanksgiving holiday, go see my sister. Now that's off the table because the girls are sick. But what are you going to do? Okay, let's talk about this pound for pound situation. So after this weekend's results in Riyadh, which of course we'll get to in a minute, the ring ratings panel came together, had the weekly discussion, and decided ultimately to bump Canelo Alvarez out of the pound for pound list. And this is the first time he's been out of the list, literally this decade. And, at one point he was number one on our list, I believe in 2021 when he went undisputed at super middleweight. And for what it's worth, at that time, I agreed, as pretty much the entire boxing industry did, that Canelo was the top guy in the sport. Now me personally, I didn't necessarily feel it's because he was the absolute best fighter in the sport, but he was active. He had 4 fights within a calendar year. And you got to remember, this is coming off of COVID, the pandemic, and like the shutdown, which had a detrimental effect to, all business in general, but including the entertainment business, which of course includes sports, which of course includes boxing. And some boxing platforms never fully recovered. PBC, after COVID, kind of became a exclusively pay-per-view platform, and then it died. It's pretty much on life support. Where is American boxing right now on American television? It doesn't exist. Top Rank is off of ESPN. So it had detrimental effects. Anyway, Canelo comes off that and has 4 fights in the calendar year and was essentially carrying the sport in North America at that point. He was fighting larger guys at super middleweight. He went undisputed. And despite the fact that he really wasn't facing what I would call elite level pound for pound type of guys, and he found a way to avoid the consensus top challenge in that division, which at that time was David Benavidez. Benavidez didn't have a belt, and he screwed himself because he lost the belt once due to cocaine, and he lost the belt again due to missing weight. So that's on him. Canelo cleans out the division. Yeah, he's the biggest star. He's the biggest money guy in the sport. He's the face. He's the most active champion at that time. He was the number one guy. Had no issue with that. And I totally rated him number one at that point. Kind of by default. It felt like we were waiting for some of these younger guys to kind of step up and claim their place on the pound for pound list and knock him off his perch, right? Well, since then, we've seen those things happen. Inoue comes up, Usyk comes up, Crawford comes up, and eventually beats Canelo, right? That just happened this year. And so those are like the top three. Now, Bam Rodriguez is right there. Dimitri Bivol's right there. And I've been saying for years that Canelo, and go back and check the record. Those of you who follow me on X, those of you who listen to the show, watch the show, I know I don't go live as much as I used to, but when I do go live once or twice a month, if you've been paying attention the last couple of years, I've been saying it consistently. I've had the same energy on this. Canelo's not a pound for pound top 10 guy anymore. So anyway, it comes out that this week that Ring Magazine has removed Canelo from the top 10. And this was met with a lot of anger with the Canelo fans. And I made a post on X today. I'll paraphrase. I basically said, hey, the Ring Ratings Committee finally caught up to what I've been saying for years. And that was met with some anger. That I've been called a Canelo hater and all these things, right? And I've been getting that for the past couple of years because I've been just stating my opinion on this and giving my reasons why. Here's the thing. Canelo fans are passionate, and you can say the same thing with any superstar fighter. So whenever you criticize a superstar fighter, you're going to be met with some anger from their fans, whether it's Canelo, Floyd Mayweather, Mike Tyson, Muhammad Ali, whoever throughout the history of boxing. And so it's no different with Canelo. So this really bothered some people, right? And it really pissed some people off. So let me just say for the Canelo fans that multiple things can be true at the same time. And oftentimes in life, multiple things are true at the same time, congruently. And so with Canelo, and I've been saying this too, I've been consistent. I'm going to repeat myself for the 500th time. First ballot Hall of Famer. He's got my vote. The first year of eligibility, I don't care who's on the ballot. Canelo's getting a check mark on my ballot. He's in. And I think that he will unanimously make the Hall of Fame. I don't quite put him as an all-time great. I think he falls short of that distinction, but that's a whole nother discussion we can get into later on. But I do think he's one of the top 10 fighters to come out of Mexico. I would not say top 5, but lower tier, lower end of the top 10 to come out of Mexico. But in terms of brand recognition and like superstar status, you can make an argument he is the most popular fighter, even more popular than Chavez. And here's why I'll say that. Chavez was super popular in America with Mexican-American fans and boxing diehards, but not necessarily casual fans. Not that Canelo is really big with casual fans, but they know who he is. And the money Canelo has brought in, significantly more than Chavez brought in, even when you adjust for inflation and all that stuff. So you can make an argument, a very valid argument, that outside of Mexico, globally, Canelo, at least in the United States for sure, was the biggest commercial attraction ever to come out of Mexico. That's a significant accomplishment. Think of Mexico's boxing tradition, right? First ballot Hall of Famer. At one point was the number one guy. However, all those things are true, and what I'm about to say is also true. He has not had a top 10 pound for pound resume in years. He hasn't. In 2021, Canelo gets his last elite level win, in my opinion, and I think this is an opinion shared by most. He stops Caleb Plant. And again, Caleb Plant, Billy Joe Saunders, Callum Smith, these are not pound for pound level guys, but they're good fighters, and they're naturally larger than Canelo. And he was beating them and beating them decisively. And he was doing it active. He was being active. He was fighting 3-4 times a year. around that time, and again, this is post-COVID when like the sport is kind of barely trudging along, right? And Canelo's getting in the ring every few months. Boom, 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 boom. So pound for pound, number one guy at that point. Then what happens in 2022? After Canelo goes undefeated, gets all the belts, what's the fight everybody wants to see? They want to see him fight David Benavidez. Either that or a rematch with Dimitri Bivol. Those are the two fights that everybody wants. Okay. And now some of you are playing Monday morning quarterback and you're having this revisionist history. Go back. Those are the fights everybody wanted. And Canelo found a way to avoid both those fights. He found excuses and reasons why he didn't want those fights to happen, right? I should mention, let me back up. In 2022, I forgot to mention the first Bivol fight. He fights Dimitri Bivol. Everyone wants to see Benavidez. He loses to Bivol. He doesn't really lose any steam because people are like, well, he moved up in weight. He was injured. Let's give him a pass. He's still undisputed super middleweight. They still want to see the Benavidez fight or the Bivol rematch. Sorry, I jumped ahead of myself. So after he loses to Bivol, people want to see Benavidez or a Bivol rematch, really nothing else. Well, what does he do after that point? He fights an ancient Gennady Golovkin who hasn't fought since, was semi-retired. That was Golovkin's gold watch, as they say. That was his retirement check. He is now the president of World Boxing. So, like, he's, even at that point, Golovkin was already half out the door fighter-wise. It was getting into life after boxing. And you see that now with what he's done since that third Canelo fight. The Jermell Charlo fight. A lot of people consider that an elite win. I absolutely do not. Going into the Canelo fight, Jermell Charlo had fought 3 times in 4 years. He got a gift in his first fight with Castaño. A lot of people felt he lost that fight. Either way, it was very, very close. He decisively wins the rematch. Credit to him. But he hadn't fought in 16 months coming into that fight with Canelo's. Moves up 2 weight classes. Hadn't fought in 16 months, 3 fights in 4 years, and does nothing but run and survive for 12 rounds. Yeah, I'm not calling that an elite level win. And then on top of that, who else did he fight? Berlanga, guys like that, right? So his resume has been very, very weak. Guys, in the last 2 years, fighters like Devin Haney, Shakur Stevenson, they have better resumes than Canelo. Even David Benavidez. These guys all have better resumes than Canelo. So when you look at Ring's pound for pound list, and let me go ahead and pull it up. This is an updated pound for pound list. As you see, Crawford's number 1. Usyk, Inoue, Bam, Bivol, Beterbiev, Nakatani, Stevenson, Benavidez, Haney. Now, I don't necessarily agree with all of those. I don't necessarily agree with the rating of all of them. But for the most part, the top 5 names I completely do agree with. I might change the order a little bit, but I agree with those top 5 names. In the second half of the top 10, I don't necessarily agree with that order or all of the names, but this is a pretty solid list. But I think most people out there would agree. I would say top to bottom is the best pound for pound list of any media platform. I don't know. You guys can't really dispute that. But Canelo's gone. And again, this upset a lot of people. But I think that they're just not wanting to accept that the ride is over. And, you know, a characteristic I've noticed about myself, I like to see trends as they're kind of forming and call it out before it's comfortable and safe to call it out. So this Canelo pound for pound debate, I've been saying since 2022 that he wasn't a top 10 pound for pound guy, or 2023, I should say. After the loss to Bivol, then he comes back and doesn't fight Benavidez and kind of just, it's cherry pick after cherry pick. I should back up real quick. Guys, I've been covering Canelo for well over a decade. I've covered Canelo events from California to New York to Florida to Texas to Nevada, all over the country. I am well connected with some people related to his camp. I'm not saying like I'm best friends, but we're connected enough where we talk regularly. I can say this is my opinion. I'm not going to say anything, I'm not confirming this. In my humble opinion, based upon the things I know, the decision to not fight Benavidez in 2022 and to fight Bivol was a calculation that they thought the Bivol fight was an easier fight. and it would look better moving up in weight, grabbing another belt against a guy that they overlooked and underrated a bit. In other words, it was a cherry pick gone wrong. They cherry picked Kovalev. It worked out. It almost didn't. The first 9-10 rounds of that fight didn't necessarily look good, but Kovalev was in horrible health coming into that fight, and it worked out in the end for them in those late rounds. Kovalev's conditioning saved Canelo. But it was a miscalculation on their part, simply put. And since that point, there's just been a less than spectacular run that doesn't warrant pound for pound list. And so for a lot of passionate Canelo fans, it's like, having a favorite band and you follow them on tour and you buy all their albums and you can't wait for the new albums to drop. Every single's a banger for like year after year after year. Every album's great. And then all of a sudden it just kind of starts to fizzle out. And they release a new album and it doesn't chart. And as a diehard fan, you're like, what happened? Holy shit, what's wrong with people? Why aren't they buying this new album? And like your love of this band kind of blinds you to what a lot of other people in the public are seeing. It's like, hey man, the glory days are over. This band can still play their greatest hits, but like they're not on that razor's edge where they're dropping like amazing shit anymore. Those days are over. They've had their peak and now it's going to go down. And so I think a lot of diehard Canelo fans are having issues with that. And that's natural. Again, I think it goes that way for every superstar fighter. So again, looking at this list, I should also state, pound for pound, everyone has different criteria, but generally speaking, people's criteria is your overall body of work, your recent resume, what have you done for me lately, doing pound for pound kind of stuff, meaning you're moving up in weight and fighting bigger guys. Maybe you're staying in one division, but you're dominating. You're cleaning it out and you're dominating the opposition and cleaning out a whole division. You're fighting other pound for pound level guys, right? And those are the things. And some people like this thing more and that thing less or whatever, but those are basically the criteria, right? And again, I go back to Canelo and it's like, honestly, guys, a lot of this stuff is political too. For years on the committee, I stated, I don't even rate 10 fighters pound for pound. I don't even think there's 10 guys that warrant pound for pound consideration in my mind. But if I had to name 10, Canelo wouldn't be among them. Maybe 9 or 10, right around there, but that's about it. And that fell on deaf ears. Completely fell on deaf ears. And you have to remember, this is a business. And for the last year, 2 years, the Canelo Crawford fight was being talked about. And I think a big part of the promotional push for that fight was, hey, these are 2 pound for pound fighters, 2 of the best in the world. And, Canelo is this elite, dominant, all-time great super middleweight champion. And Crawford's moving up 2 weight classes after already moving up 1 from being the undisputed welterweight champion. And he's fighting this elite, the best fighter to come out of Mexico ever, one of the top fighters, all-time great in the history of boxing, in his absolute prime physical peak, a top 3 or 4 fighter in boxing still. That was a big part of the marketing push. And now that the fight's over, and by the way, I told you 3 minutes after that fight, we're probably going to get a Canelo Crawford rematch. You saw in the news this week that they're already discussing it. Sorry to be right again, but they'll probably go back and do it again because it's the only fight either guy can really do right now that brings anywhere near that kind of money in. And you're still going to hear the promotional push, all-time great this, all-time great that. But I think that the industry now that they got that big payoff is ready to push the next thing. And the next thing is David Benavidez. It is Devin Haney. It is Shakur Stevenson. They're ready to push the next thing and push Canelo out. And that's the way the media works, guys. I'm just one of those type of dudes that will call it out a couple years beforehand when it's not safe to. That's just something about my personality. I do it in my personal life. It's served me well in business, in investing, in my career, in my relationships. It's served me very in real estate. It served me very well, but it also gets me in trouble because sometimes you say something, and even though it's completely based in logic and reason, um, and I admit sometimes my delivery is abrasive, and I could be a little more sensitive and soft with my landing. I'm working on that. I'm trying to get better. I'm a father now, so trying to work on that. But when you say something, even though it's completely based in logic, a lot of people aren't ready to hear it yet. They don't want to accept it, right? And it takes a while for the thing to settle on their mind and for it to all be them be comfortable with it. And then it becomes safe to say and safe to feel. And then everyone says it. And you're like, motherfucker, I've been saying that for 2-3 years now. You finally caught up. But that's the way the world works. And so when you're operating like that, it helps. I'm ahead of the curve when I invest. I'm ahead of the curve when I buy a home. I know where to buy. And I've done extraordinarily well in real estate in my life and investing. I've done very well in my relationships and things like that because I can kind of see a trend, and it's a good thing about my personality, but it's also a blessing and a curse. Anyway, all right, I'll shut up now about me. That's the pound for pound debate. We can continue to discuss it, but yeah, Canelo's just not that dude anymore. And again, multiple things can be true at the same time. He was that dude. He isn't anymore. It's time to accept and move forward. Okay, super chat from Mark Ashley. Thank you so much, Mark. He just dropped a super chat, no comment. I appreciate it, brother. Thank you so much. We got another one here from Trent Nonpareil. Thank you so much, Trent. He said, is Zerto ducking Opataya? Joshua versus Paul, who you got? So good stuff. Thank you for the super chat. You mentioned Zerto. Of course, it's being discussed, or I think it's actually set in stone that David Benavidez is not going to wait around for Dmitry Bivol or Artur Beterbiev, and he's going to move up to cruiserweight and fight Zerto Ramirez. Look, Opataya is a tough fight, okay, for either Benavidez or Zerto, and he doesn't bring a lot to the table financially. Meanwhile, David Benavidez, who's American, and Zerto, who's Mexican. But remember now, Benavidez is Mexican heritage, right? He's Mexican-American. So you have an American versus a Mexican. Benavidez will be moving up in weight. There would be going for a title, another weight class. There's a whole bunch of stuff here that they can market. And just in terms of styles, this would be an entertaining fight. So that's why they're going that direction. Unless something's changed, you guys can let me know. But as far as I know, that's the direction that they're going in. So would I say Zerto is ducking Opataya? I won't go that far, but he's certainly not in a rush to fight him. Now, look, David Benavidez is not an easy night at the office for anybody. So I'm not going to accuse Zerto of ducking anybody. But I do think business-wise, yeah, he's probably pushing that one aside because Benavidez is going to bring more money. There's more opportunity there. And for Benavidez, it's the same thing. If you don't want to fight Bivol or Beterbiev, I want to say Beterbiev, but I believe it's Beterbiev. It's the correct pronunciation. Anyway, Zerto is in my opinion, more winnable fight. You don't have to struggle to make 175. Benavidez is a big guy. The first time he stepped in the boxing gym, I want to say he weighed like 250, 260. This is a guy who has melted off nearly 100 pounds to fight in the divisions that he fights in. So he's a big boy. And you also have to remember Zerto has moved up. He's another big boy that made a weight unnaturally for a long time. And now he's at cruiserweight. So this is a winnable fight. Remember, Bivol fought Ramirez, and you saw how that fight went, right? I think this is a measuring stick for Benavidez. I think he should, in his mind, beat Zerto similarly to the way Bivol did. And then who knows what could be discussed in the future. But cruiserweight's right now, dude, it is, I'm not going to say a disaster, but it's a dead division. So any new life, I welcome it. As far as Joshua versus Paul, we could talk about that for a minute, guys. So Jake Paul versus Anthony Joshua. This is official. It's happening. It's going down next month in Miami, right around Christmas, right? I think like a week before Christmas. Now, look, say what you will. This apparently is not an exhibition fight. It's a real fight. You know, this is going to shatter viewership numbers for every fight in America this year. And again, that's one of those things that like people hear it and it bothers them. They get pissed, but it's true. It is going to break all the viewership numbers. It's on regular Netflix. And I haven't really discussed with too many people yet. I do know, you guys know that I'm close with the people at Kronk, right, from my hometown. I haven't talked with any of them yet, but I will. But I get the impression that they're making a calculation here. And they see something in Joshua that they can take advantage of. Now, I'm assuming this is completely on the up and up and there isn't some gentleman's agreement. Because, like, if there was a gentleman's agreement, I'd be like, dude, just make it an exhibition, you know? But if it's a real fight with real gloves and the real ring and the whole thing, I think that they see they're making a calculation and they see something in Joshua that they can take advantage of. And they want to shock the world. I will say this, 100% of the pressure is on Joshua, not only to win, but to dominate, to basically Francis Ngannou, Jake Paul, right? That's what he's supposed to do here. In fact, I think people expect him to beat Paul even quicker than he beat Ngannou, because at least Ngannou was Joshua's size. You guys saw the two of them standing next to each other. I mean, these guys are not the same size, right? Paul is even more undersized against Joshua than Alexander Usyk was. So people are expecting a first round destruction. If Paul gets out of the first round, that's a win for him. Also, when you factor in all the money, if he gets obliterated in 10 seconds, it doesn't matter. He's going to make tens of millions of dollars. So we'll talk about that fight the closer we get to it. I don't quite know what to make of it, to be honest with you. But I give Paul credit. If it's on the up and up, even if, let's just assume, I don't believe this, but let's just assume Anthony Joshua is shot to hell, it's still a huge, huge challenge and a huge risk for Jake Paul. And I give the kid credit. I mean, you have to give him credit. A lot of you guys have been hating on Jake for a long time. Man, let's give him some credit. I mean, that's a tough matchup, even if Joshua shot to hell. I should mention and show you guys, new December issue of Ring Magazine is out. Check it out. I just got this here at the crib. On the cover, Naoya Inoue, Junto Nakatani. It says it's within reach. If we get this fight at some point, it'll be the biggest fight in Japanese boxing history. Absolutely the biggest fight in Japanese boxing history. That'd be huge. Let's see. Gav in the chat says, never ever change, Michael. As a fellow father, my 10-year-old appreciates hearing truth being spoke every single day. I am with her. Thank you, my brother. I appreciate that. And then Dark BP2MS says, by the way, Shakur versus Teofimo is a great fight for U.S. boxing. Hopefully they promote it well. Fully agree. And that's happening, January, I believe. That's the kind of matchup I want to see more of, honestly, because that's like two Gen Z guys. I look forward to that one. Probably the best matchup on paper, the best Gen Z matchup on paper we've seen. So that will be a lot of fun, man. Aaron, what's up, Aaron? He says, Opataya has a huge following here in Australia. Yeah, I know that. I agree with you, but I'm just saying, globally, I just don't know if it brings the money. You have to remember the casino money, and a Zurdo Benavidez fight in Vegas, the casino is going to put some money up on that. So that brings in a different kind of pay scale. But you're right. You're absolutely correct, Aaron, that, if Benavidez wanted to travel and fight Opataya in Australia, it does a huge crowd over there. I just don't know if he wants to. Zerto's an easier fight, probably brings more money in North America anyway, and much more winnable fight. And in Vegas, it'll feel like his backyard versus going to Australia to fight Opataya. Ooh, that's tough, man. That's tough. Okay, let's talk about. We talked about pound for pound. Let's talk about this fight card last weekend. Let's talk about what we learned. So, the Night of Champions Ring 4 card in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Last weekend, a couple of prospects got some big wins. Most notably, Mohammed Alakel gets a unanimous decision win over Jaiming Lee, a kind of a battle-tested veteran. Did not get the stoppage, but won dominantly in every round. Alakel, I'll say this, technically very sound, uses distance very well, and showed a little bit of some good flashes, good timing here or there, but I get the sense, first of all, he does not have fight-changing power, and that's something you either have or you don't. He doesn't. That will cost him at some point as he moves up in opposition. I mean, you could see against Lee, he was way bigger, right? So that's going to cost him as he starts fighting guys that are better and guys that are actually his size. But also, very technically sound, like I said. Kind of, you get the impression that he wants to be perfect with everything he does. He wants to be at that perfect range, perfect angle to throw his punches. He doesn't just let them rip. The one exception in the fight, I want to say it was the 5th round, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, where he got a knockdown. He was at mid-range, and he caught Lee like kind of lunging in, kind of baited him in and just cocked back like a chopping right hand, right? And he couldn't get full extension because he didn't step back to get the extension. He just let it rip in the mid-range as Lee dove in. And so it was a chopping like halfway. He didn't get to extend it. He got 50% extension on it. And it was, I think it was a right hand, but you know what? It might have been the left. I can't remember. Either way, he gets a knockdown. And I saw that. It's like, Abel Sanchez, shout out to Abel and Leonard, who I thought did a wonderful job in this corner. But I could just picture them being like, that's what we want, just screaming like, yes, that's what we were asking for. Because in that one moment, Alakel just let it go. He didn't think. He didn't try to back up and get the range first, then shoot it. He just let it go right there in the moment. It was natural. And it wasn't a full punch. It was an arm punch. It wasn't like this, he wound up on it. But it was thrown at the right time. Thus, Lee didn't see it coming. It chopped him, drops him. Now, a puncher with legitimate world-class power, that punch ends the fight. It would have, if Bam landed that punch, and you know where I'm going to go with that in a few minutes, that ends the fight, right? So Alakel doesn't have that power. He's never going to possess that. That will hurt him at some point. But technically, very good looking prospect. A lot to build on. But if he can learn to just let punches flow like that and stop trying to be perfect with everything, he can get some knockdowns and he can hurt some guys because he can catch them coming in, catch them with a shot while they're off balance, and you could like get an equilibrium, kind of shot where you put the guy down, maybe out. But he's never going to have that game-changing power, and to me, that's what's always going to kind of limit him. Vito Mielnicki Jr., he gets a win on this card. And then Abdullah Mason and Sam Noakes for a vacant lightweight belt, the WBO, We're Bob's organization title. What a great fight this turned out to be. Really, really great fight. And, look, if you fight for this is a vacant title fight, this is the first time these guys are going after a belt, right? And sometimes you see guys just play it overly safe, particularly young guys with an undefeated record. If you do that, sometimes you can leave an opportunity on the table and fall short. You got the feeling that both of these guys really did give it everything they had on this particular night. I hate that there was a headbutt early on that caused a cut on Noakes' face that was, pretty bad cut. We'll never know for sure how much that impacted his performance. but it certainly had to have at least some impact. But I think stock-wise in this fight, Abdullah Mason came in with a ton of hype, a ton of hype. I'm not going to say his stock dropped because he got the win, and I thought that he won 7 of the 12 rounds. You could make an argument he won 8 rounds. One score was like 9 rounds to 3, which is just ridiculous. That's not the fight that happened. One of the members of the broadcast team had a score like that, just absolutely awful of how the guy continues to get work. He does not belong as an analyst on any broadcast, but whatever. Anyway, Mason's stock probably stayed the same, but he proved himself, if that makes any sense. Stock didn't necessarily rise, kind of stayed the same, but he proved himself. Noakes, on the other hand, I think his stock rose. And anytime you see a fighter lose, but his stock rises in a loss, you know you got a good fight. You know you got a good fight. I talked earlier about Gen Z matchup between Teofimo and Shakur. This fight, when it happened, I remember I was texting a few friends and I told them, you know, this was the best Gen Z fight I've seen. I'm trying to think of 2, and you guys please correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm forgetting one, but I'm trying to think of 2 Gen Z fighters, undefeated records, first big step up in opposition, fighting for a belt, all this stuff, right? And they leave it all on the line. Great style matchup. Both guys showed crazy heart and determination because both guys took big punches, both to the head and body. Mason took a lot of body punches, and they both showed something. And so I was like, man, we need more of this from Gen Z boxers. We're missing this. This element is missing, particularly from a lot of American Gen Z fighters. We're missing this element. And so I was really entertained, and it made me want to see both these guys again. That's what you want, especially from young guys. You want that kind of impression made to where it's like, man, I want to see these guys again. And, hell, I'd love to see a rematch. But even if they don't, if they go in different directions, and maybe they rematch a year or 2 down the road, whatever, I want to see them again. So that was great. That fight stole the show. Also on this card, let's talk real quick, Devin Haney, Brian Norman Jr., and I'm going to piss off a bunch of people with this one. So off this performance, Devin Haney goes back onto the Ring Magazine pound for pound list. Now, some of you agree with this, some of you don't. I will say this. Technically speaking, Haney is now a former undisputed champion, right, at lightweight, title holder at 140, and now a title holder at 147. So he's a 3-division title holder, was a legitimate champion in 1 division. And so on paper, you could absolutely make an argument pound for pound list. And I meant this when I said it earlier. You look at the last 2 or 3 years, his resume is better than Canelo's. I know that much. 2 wins over Kambosos in Australia. Loma, I thought personally he lost to Lomachenko. I know I'm not alone. But he technically gets the win. Beats Prograis, former title holder. The Ryan Garcia fight, you can't count that, guys, because Ryan Garcia was cheating. He's on performance-enhancing drugs. Somehow, too, he lost his next fight decisively, and somehow he's going to fight for a world title. His next fight, I can't really explain that one, except that the powers that be in boxing are setting it up so that we get a unification match at welterweight between Haney and Garcia in 2026. So that's probably what we're going to get. Love it or hate it, that's the business of boxing. But then a win over Ramirez, and now this win over Norman. So look, all of these wins and losses, there's some smoke and mirrors. I could literally break down the nuance between every single one of these fights for Devin Haney and just add truth to it, the reality of this. But for a Gen Z fighter, Haney is right behind. Bam is the number 1 guy, right, in terms of Gen Z fighters, American Gen Z fighters. His resume is light years beyond the rest of them. Then it's Teofimo Lopez, but right behind him is Haney. You got to give him that. Let's talk about Brian Norman Jr. for a minute, though, because my man Vince Cummings of the Boxing Rant podcast had a tweet a few weeks back. I'm going to paraphrase. I'm not going to pull up the tweet, but he basically said, he was talking about this upcoming fight between Haney and Norman. And he said, he's like, I'm going to laugh so hard when everyone slobs all over Haney for being this pound for pound great after he beats a very average Brian Norman Jr. and beats him decisively. That's basically what Vince said. And I retweeted it and said, you ain't lying, Vince, because that's basically the way I saw it. Now, in fairness, I did not do a preview video. I can't sit here and pat myself on the back and say, I told you so. But I will tell you this, and those of you out there who I chat with offline all the time, you know this. I favored Haney to win this fight pretty clearly. And that's the thing about this card, and I want to talk about that in a minute. All three of these fights on the main card, we knew who was going to win. If you know boxing and you understand what, the ins and outs and matchmaking and how it works, you knew who was going to win. That being said, the manner in which these guys won, they did their job. They did what they were supposed to do. Bam, Haney, Benavidez did what they were supposed to do. So you have to give them that much credit. Bam, I thought, had the best performance of the night, clearly. We'll talk about that in a minute. Anyway, for Haney, is Brian Norman, here's a question I want to ask you guys, because I mentioned this on X and I took some heat for it, but seriously, is Brian Norman one of Devin Haney's top 5 wins? Because I don't think he is. I don't. I think Devin Haney beating old, well past their prime versions of like Jorge Linares, Joseph Diaz, George Kambosos, Vasily Lomachenko. These are guys that Haney had an incredible size advantage against because he's a natural welterweight that somehow, I won't get into nuance there, but somehow made the lightweight limit. He had a massive size advantage against these guys. However he managed to do it, he did it. Again, not going down that rabbit hole, but massive size advantage. And regardless of that, he beat those guys. And say what you will about an old Linares, Diaz, Kambosos, obviously Loma, first ballot Hall of Famer, a Prograis, an old ancient Prograis, an old ancient Ramirez. These guys were all considerably more proven than Brian Norman Jr. Considerably more proven. They had accomplished more in their career, period. And I'm not trying to shit on Brian Norman. He's a tough guy. He's an honest fighter. But guys, I'm looking back. He wins an interim world title against Giovanni Santillán, right? And then he gets the full title against Derek Cuevas, has a defense against Yin Sasaki, and then he fights Haney. I'm sorry, guys. That's in terms of, you look at every title holder in the sport, okay, before this weekend, there's over 100 world title belts out there now, something like 10,000 of them. In all seriousness, it's like 100. And I'm looking at each title holder and their path to the title, who they had to fight and who they beat to win the title and the manner in which they won the title. Brian Norman Jr. was among the weakest title holders in professional boxing coming into this matchup against Devin Haney. That's just the truth. I'm not saying that at all to shit on the kid. I'm not. He's a tough fighter. And he did everything he could do against Haney. He was completely outclassed. And he hung as tough as he could, right? But, by the way, one judge had a draw in terms of rounds. That is just not what took place in the fight. I thought that it was like a 9 rounds to 3, at least 8 rounds to 4 kind of matchup. Maybe I shouldn't say Norman was completely outclassed. But here's the thing. This is why I bring it up, guys. Back to the rest of Haney's resume. I mentioned Linares, Diaz, Kambosos, Lomachenko, even Prograis. All those guys, Haney had a significant size advantage. It wasn't minor. I mean, Lomachenko was a semi-retired, fairly inactive, blown-up featherweight fighting a natural welterweight who, I'm not going to get into how, made the lightweight limit. And Kambosos, all these guys, Diaz, come on, Diaz started his career at, I think, featherweight too. And so Now Haney goes up to welterweight, and he's going to fight guys his size. Okay. If Norman was the size of Kambosos, if he was the size of Loma, the size of Diaz, Linares, I honestly think that Haney would have stopped him. On the flip side of that, if Kambosos, Lomachenko, if those guys were the size of Brian Norman, if they were legitimate welterweights, those fights look very different for Devin Haney. Very different. So I mentioned all this because now Haney's at welterweight, where he doesn't have this massive size advantage that helped him get through some rough moments in fights in the past. And that's going to affect how he looks going forward. We shall see how he performs. Okay, Jesse Rodriguez gets a KO win over Fernando Martinez. And for Martinez, this was his first loss. Martinez had beat Kazuto Ioka twice in Japan. He had 2 wins over German Cajas, who's a solid fighter. And so he had a solid resume coming in here. And he gets knocked out decisively in 10 rounds. And Bam pretty much controlled all the action. Maybe you can give Martinez a round, maybe a round or two. So this is a very dominant win by Bam Rodriguez. And so, again, back to the pound-for-pound discussion talk that we started with at the top of the show. I think right now you have to have Bam in your top 5. A lot of people are saying, because it's been like the big 3, right? Usyk, Crawford, and Inoue. Those are the big 3, and then it's everybody else. And now people are saying, you know what? It should be the big 4. Maybe, but I do want to back up a little bit. By the way, I'm a huge fan of Bam. I am, okay? But he beats Quadras. Good win, especially for a young kid. But Quadras was on his way out. He was now retired, right? I think he just announced that. He beats Srisuke Sorungbisai, a very old version of him. Again, very good win, but these are old versions of those fighters who had, not looked as sharp as they once had. Gets a good win over Sonny Edwards. I actually think that's one of his better wins because Sonny really was in his prime. Beats Estrada. Very good win over Estrada. But again, Estrada is, on the last leg of his career. In fact, Estrada's only fought once since that loss to Bam, which was a knockout loss. Great win. Although Bam was put down, right, once in that fight. It was a good back and forth fight. But Estrada came back and had one fight against a journeyman level opponent in Mexico just to get back in the win column. That was this summer. And that's it. So he's not the same guy that he once was. So I'm not trying to put down Bam's resume. He's beat some legends of 115, of those lower weight classes. But there is a but. He hasn't beat one of these, the elite young guys. Now, this fight against Martinez, that's a different story. This is the first time he's got in there against the guy. Martinez, I have to state, is in his mid-30s. He is. And his resume early on was almost exclusively in his home country of Argentina. But he has traveled. He has fought in America. He has fought in Japan. And he has beat some quality guys. So this was the first time that Bam, to me, again, this fight and then the fight against Sonny Edwards, those to me were even more impressive wins than beating those legends because these are guys in their prime that he's beating. I should mention, though, Sonny Edwards, 2 fights after Bam, gets stopped in 6 rounds, gets stopped quicker by Galal Yafai. So I absolutely consider Bam among the top 5 fighters in the sport right now. I do put him above Beterbiev. I do not rate him above Bivol. I can't. Bivol has a win against a pound-for-pound Hall of Fame fighter in Beterbiev who is undefeated. Bivol also has a lot of other really good wins on his resume. He beat Zerto, who now is a world title holder at cruiserweight, and dominated Zerto. And there's other wins he has that are solid wins. I cannot put Bam above Bivol right now. I just can't. I think some people are getting caught up in the moment. It was an amazing performance. The kid's doing what he needs to do. But I want to see him get in there. Let's look, you know what? Let's take a look at the ratings. Because I want to see, let's look at 115, the division, and let's look at, honestly, who we want to see him fight. So let's go to junior bantamweight. And I'm going to share my screen again, guys, so you can see this. Where's it at? Share my screen. Boom. Let's just look at this real quick. So Bam is the champ. He just beat Fernando Martinez. Ioka already lost twice to Martinez. So Quadras, he's gone. So it's like, who do you fight here? Well, I'd like to see Bam move up. Let's go to bantamweight. Bantamweight's wide open. There's several Japanese guys he can go up there and fight. It's kind of wide open. I'm looking. Let's go up to 122. There's the name. Inoue. I think at some point, we talk about Inoue and we talk about Nakatani. I want to see that, obviously. That's a huge fight. But I want to see Bam in there against a killer like Inoue. I'm not saying right now. I think that's too much, right? But that's the kind of matchup that I want to see. I want to see him take on a guy like that. I'm looking around these other divisions, and yeah, it's just there's not a whole lot of names, man. There's not a whole lot of names. I'm trying to think of who else might be out there. And I'm going to look up Junto right now because I want to see what he's got going on. Yeah, he has a fight coming up next month. That's right. Junto's at 118, and he's got that fight coming up in Riyadh right after Christmas. He's fighting on the same card Inoue's fighting on, right? So Inoue's at 22, Nakatani's at 118. Obviously, those two are on a collision course. But I have to say, I'd love to see Bam fight Nakatani or just somebody on that level. And then long-term, Inoue, something like that. I know it's asking for a lot because the kid's a couple divisions below. But until we get something like that, at this point, I can't put him past Bivol. That's just my personal preference. I know a lot of you out there disagree with it. For what it's worth, Bivol is out right now. He was only going to fight once this year. So in terms of activity, you want to put Bam over Bivol right now? I get that. I 100% get that. Either way, whether you have Bam at 4 or 5, he's in the top 5 right now in the sport. He really is. He's proven that. Okay, let me make sure I didn't miss. Before I get into the main event, I got a couple of super chats. Let's hit these real quick. Super chat from Shit in the Beans. I love that. Thank you so much. Shout out to MOB for keeping it real. Been listening to you for years, but rarely catch a show live. Pound for pound, #1 broadcast in the game. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I appreciate that so much, guys. That's awesome, man. Thank you. I can't tell you what that means to me. And thank you for sticking with me because I know, again, I don't go live very often these days, being a full-time dad here. D-Style Boxing with the super chat. What's up, D-Style? Good to hear from you, brother. He says, Jai, kind of not that big in Australia. Zoo Brothers are bigger names. I follow Australian boxing pretty close. Yeah, that's a good point. Zoo definitely, he's kind of ruined that name, but the Zoo Brothers definitely were doing crowds. I can't say I've seen Opataya do a big crowd. That is a good point, D-Style. So, I do agree with Aaron that Opataya is a brand, but I'm with you. I don't think he's that big of a brand as like the Zoo Brothers. And I certainly know that, like, for Benavidez, a fight with Zerto, it just brings them more money. It's like I said before, the casinos will put up more money. You could do that in Vegas. It just makes more money. And I actually think it's a more winnable fight. I just risk versus reward is a big thing in boxing. Another part of this too is Jai has a frame where he could move up to heavyweight. He's got that Usyk kind of frame where he'd be a small heavyweight, but he could do it. Zerto fought at 68, 75 before moving up. So, like, he's got a similar frame to Benavidez. And so I just think it's so, and he doesn't punch hard. He's not really a hard puncher. He's more of a volume guy. I just think Benavidez, they're going to like that matchup a lot more. They're going up against Opetaya. So I get it from a business perspective. I get it. Okay. Let's talk about the main event. David Benavidez, since we just mentioned him, gets a TKO 7 win against Anthony Yarde. Drops him in the 7th round. He did get deducted some points for hitting Yarde while he was down. Didn't really matter in the end. He gets the decisive win over Anthony Yarde. And this was another one where, like, it kind of, I find it very interesting that people thought this was going to be like this super competitive fight. I thought Benavidez had fought much better guys than Yarde before this fight. So Anthony Yarde, I understand that he gave Beterbiev a tougher than expected fight. And I want to say, like, some judges had him ahead before he was stopped against Beterbiev in, I think it was 2023. I think that was 2 years ago. I want to say, he gave him a tougher than expected fight. I know he gave Sergey Kovalev a tougher than expected fight. But I honestly think Beterbiev, Kovalev, I think those guys took him lightly. They didn't take him seriously. Had they taken him seriously and been on that razor's edge, I think that those fights would have gone a lot easier for them. Ultimately, in the end, though, I mean, what happened? Both Kovalev and Beterbiev stopped him. So, yes, this fight only goes 7 rounds. Actually, I just pulled it up here. Beterbiev stopped him in 8 rounds. Kovalev stopped him in 11 rounds. So Benavidez gets the stoppage quicker than those guys did, right? And so that is, in the eyes of the casual fans, like, oh, man, he did better than Beterbiev. Oh, okay. Yeah, technically. You could also make the argument that those guys fought a fresher version of Yarde, a younger, fresher version. Either way, this result did not surprise me in the slightest. In fact, I'm kind of surprised it went 7 rounds just because of the styles of this thing. I just thought that Benavidez would chop Yarde up, just the way that he punches in volume and just kind of rolls downhill. But I thought his win over Morel was a much better win, even though that went to distance. I rate Morel way better than Yarde. And even though he fought a shot, well-faded version of Vojdik, and that went to distance, I still rate that as a better win than Yarde. So this is a good win, don't get me wrong. But for people to, like, go crazy about this, again, guys, I look at this fight card, and I'm looking at the 3 main fights where, again, Haney, Bam, and Benavidez did their thing. They did what they were supposed to do. But, like, did any of you going into this fight, honestly, how many of you out there thought these were 50-50 matchups? If you look at the betting odds going in this weekend, there was all 3 of these fights had clear favorites. So things kind of went according to script. The only fight that I think surprised people, certainly surprised me, was between Mason and Noakes. That was better than I thought it was going to be. I thought that could potentially turn into like a stinker, but it was fantastic. So, like, that was the surprise of this card. Other than that, kind of as expected. And so I mentioned that because, and here's where I got to get a little negative. I'm going to upset some of you. But a lot of you were slobbing over this card. A lot of people in the media say, oh my God, what a fantastic card. What an amazing card. Oh my God. Oh my God. It was a good card. And for the record, I put a poll on my X and I asked you guys, what rating do you give this fight card? Knowing the matchups coming in, the price of it, because this was pay-per-view, and how the results played out. A, B, C, or D. And there's something like 3/4 of you gave it an A or a B. That's great. I love that. We need more of that in freaking boxing. So that's great. And I think in terms of, like, entertainment value and stuff, I'm right there with you guys. Even though we got results that we kind of expected in the 3 main fights, they were entertaining. The Haney fight, for a Haney fight, it was fairly entertaining for a Haney fight. But like the other fights, Bam and Benavidez, really exciting because it was explosive, right? And then Mason Noakes gave us a fight of the year candidate. As I mentioned before, best Gen Z fight I've seen so far. So like all of that, yes. But I have to say this. Please don't be mad at me. I have to say it. I have to be this guy. Guys, 20 years ago, this would have been a triple header on HBO Boxing After Dark. This would have been a triple header on Showtime Championship Boxing. Sorry, that's just the truth. And I say that because it's indicative of how much this sport has changed in America, where a fight card like this wouldn't have even been HBO Championship Boxing. I don't even think it'd be on that level. This would have been Boxing After Dark, seriously, which was like the tier below it. And I say that because these guys are all like young. There's no like superstars on the card. But this would have been part of your regular HBO subscription, and this would have been just another card. You'd have gotten 10 cards like this throughout the year. Seriously. If this were the 90s, you'd get well over a dozen cards like this a year, just as part of your subscription. Same thing on Showtime. And so that's just kind of where we're at in the sport right now, where this was one of the better cards of the year. I don't think it was the best card of the year. I'm looking back and I'm thinking of like the what was it? The Bivol Beerbiev rematch. Like that was a really good card. Like we've had a couple of really good stacked cards that were really fun, but this was among them. When I see a fight card at this level, and I'm like, man, this is I don't know, in the top 3 or 4 cards of the year. Like that's like, wow, that's crazy. Like, again, HBO Championship Boxing, pay-per-view, all that stuff, you would have got 4 or 5 pay-per-view fights well beyond this level every year. Back in the day, 20, 30 years ago. That's just where it was, guys. And so I mentioned that because going into next month? Or no, wait. Next weekend. Not this weekend coming up, but the weekend after that. December 6th in San Antonio, we have PBC on Amazon Prime pay-per-view. It's a similar kind of card. I might put it maybe a tier below the one we just saw. Pretty much the same. Isaac Pitbull Cruz against Lamont Roach. Iris Lara against Janabek Alamkhanallah. Stephen Fulton versus Oshaki Foster. And so a lot of people are really excited about this card. And they're talking about, man, it's stacked. Oh my God, what an amazing card. I'm so excited. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, it's a solid card. I'm not saying it's a bad card, but Lamont Roach is going to beat Isaac Cruz. I'll go on the record now because I didn't before this Riyadh one, but Alamkhanallah is going to beat Lara. Roach is going to beat Cruz. Foster's going to beat Fulton. Like we know that. We know that. It's not a matter of if they'll beat, it's how. How will they beat them? So like we know going in what we're going to see. And for the record, actually, you know what? Fulton, Foster, that might be the most competitive fight on paper, but I feel very confidently Alamkhanallah and Roach are going to win their fights. In terms of action, maybe it plays out more evenly than the fight card we just saw in Riyadh. You never know. But I'm just telling you going in, like that's what I see. Right? And again, I'm looking at that card and it's a good card, it's a solid card, but it's a pay-per-view worthy card. This sort of card on, again, 20, 30 years ago, it's HBO Boxing After Dark. That's just what it is. It's not on the level that, you know, some people are saying it is. So I don't know. That's just, I feel the need. I have to mention that. I have to mention that because it just shows where the product is at right now, where a card like that, which again, you got 10 times a year on your regular HBO Showtime subscription, is now among the top 5 most anticipated cards of the year, and it's on a pay-per-view. Wow. So I'm old enough to remember, and I'm 46. I'm not that freaking old. It's not like I'm 70 years old saying, Brock, when I listened on the radio, I'm a young guy. It's just, it wasn't that long ago. Where like cards like this were very common and they were part of your subscription. And you got The Sopranos and you got Oz and shit like that. You know what I'm saying? You got The Wire, you got all that stuff, and you got fight cards like this almost monthly. Times have changed. Times have changed. Okay. Ordman in the chat says, you're just getting old, Mike. You're just displaying the old. Past times are better than what we have now. Listen, man, I hear you because I knew that it was coming. I'm not trying to be the get off my lawn guy, but I'm just saying, like, I really am. I'm still a young guy. I'm only 46. That's pretty freaking young. Okay. And like, I still have more than half my life ahead of me. And because I'm living to 100, damn it. So I'm just saying, I'm old enough to remember when I'm not even talking about when I was a kid. I'm talking about when I was in my 20s and I was broke as hell, but I still had my HBO and my Showtime. I ate ramen noodles that night, but I still had HBO and Showtime because I was getting my boxing, damn it. Because you got shit like this as part of your regular subscription price. And it was $10, $15 a month or something like that. It was part of some bundle thing. It wasn't anywhere near what it costs today. So like, hell, I don't even know if it was that much. And also, like, I remember at one point I got a military discount at the cable company, all this shit, because I was in the Marine Corps. So like, it wasn't that long ago. Is all I'm saying. It's like, it's so crazy to me, like how much it's changed so quickly, and how fragmented everything is. Because we just mentioned, the show last week in Riyadh, that was on DAZN pay-per-view, and now we have this one coming up next weekend on Amazon Prime pay-per-view. How many shows has Amazon Prime had this year? 3? What a disaster that whole thing has been over there. What a disaster. Anyway, so yes, I'm not trying to be out of touch, get off my lawn. My day was better. Look, I will clearly say, in some ways, boxing today is better, way better than when I was a kid. Here's how it's better, okay, for all my Gen Zers out there. The competition is truly global now. We used to get, it was American domination. And part of that was because more Americans participated in boxing. That is true. But I think the larger part of it that the American press, because they're biased and ethnocentric, ignore is that the rest of the world wasn't competing as much. And particularly the communist countries that, oppress their people. Yay, communism. They weren't allowing their people to compete, and you didn't have the systems, the infrastructure in place to get these guys into the professional ranks that you do today. So now American fighters have to compete with the same global talent that they have always had to in the amateur system. And yes, you had dominant American Olympic teams back in like the 70s, the 80s, right? And now you don't see that as much, again, because a lot of kids aren't going into boxing and going through the amateurs. They're going pro as soon as they can. They're going into other sports. I understand all that. But also there's that global talent. I like seeing the global talent. I enjoy it. I love that we have fighters from Africa, Latin America, Australia, New Zealand, China, Japan, all over the place. Like that, to me, makes the sport more fun, more colorful. It's just a lot of fun seeing this global talent base. And it's kind of enriched the sport. Thank goodness for the international fighters. Where would we be without them right now? So that's one way the sport's way better. Also, the benefit of these streaming apps is you can go back and watch replays of these fights anytime you want. Back in the day, you had to record everything on a tape or buy a DVD of it or something, which I would do back then. In the back of boxing magazines, there'd be like places where guys sold DVDs of fights. and you had to go back and buy them to get fights. Now, dude, you can find stuff on YouTube, all the streaming platforms. You can just pull up all the fights. That's awesome. Lastly, they stream the entire card. So prospects are getting eyes on them. And the only prospects that would get people looking at them back in the day were guys that were like Olympic medalists, had all the hype. Oscar De La Hoya out of the Olympics, everyone was watching him fight. Sugar Ray Leonard, they're watching his pro debut, right? But like most prospects, you didn't see these guys until they were 10, 15, sometimes 20 or more fights in. Now you're seeing everybody. It's pretty damn cool. So there's a lot of great things about the sport right now versus when I was younger. But one of the downsides, the real downsides, particularly in American boxing, is that you have a show that's solid, has some solid matchups, even though you kind of knew who was going to win unless there was some major upset. And it's being like slobbed and all over and salivated on like it's Hagler Hearns or something. Like, guys, I just have to bring it up. I have to note it. All right. Let's see. Eric in the chat says, Mike, get off my lawn in the grand. I think you meant to see Gran Torino voice. Great freaking movie. Great freaking movie. And my man here says, MOB, everything is free on IPTV. Yes, sir. Fire Stick, baby. Look, man, I used to be one of those guys that was like, you got to support boxing no matter what. You got to buy the pay-per-view. You got to support. It's us versus the world, baby. It's boxing versus everybody, right? And then I got to a point, I'm like, why am I doing this? I'm like a battered woman that keeps going back to an asshole who slaps me around. Why am I doing this? I got this fucking Fire Stick. I'm watching it on the Fire Stick. I will openly admit it right here. I didn't pay for the show this Saturday. I watched it on the Fire Stick. It was on early enough where I could watch it while I was getting dinner ready for my girls and playing with them. I kind of had it on in the background and I could watch it. I could tune in while I was doing my thing with them and doing stuff around the house for my wife, whatever. So like we're having our Saturday and the weather wasn't great outside. So we're inside the house anyway and I could watch it. It's free on IPTV. And then, yesterday I'm watching the Lions game, the Detroit Lions game on local Detroit TV on IPTV. I watch all my Lions games, my Tigers games. I'm down in Atlanta. They don't have that shit on TV down here. I can get the local stations from Detroit. I can watch any football game I want. I'm like, man, I want to see what Josh Allen's doing up in Buffalo. Boop, boop, boop. Put on Fox Buffalo. Watch. I mean, look, dude. That's where I'm at with all this. And I don't blame you guys for feeling the same way. That's all I'm saying. Yeah, Eric says Mike's team Fire Stick boy. Yeah, dude. That's where I'm at. Now I will say this. There have been a handful of cards where I'm like, man, this is a good card. I'm going to support this. I'm going to freaking buy it. There have been a few in the last couple of years. But anyway, yeah. Danny says, don't say that boxing police is going to come for you. Hey, man, the boxing police, there's a mile wrapped around my fucking house. Those guys trying to get me. I ain't even worried about them no more. Screw them. I seriously, I'm at a point where, like, I don't know, guys. Several things have happened in my life over the last few years. 2020, the whole COVID thing, and just seeing the way that was handled really changed my perspective on sports and entertainment in general and how unimportant it is. And how important family is. That same year, 2020, my brother Anthony died. He was my best friend. We just passed the 5-year anniversary of his death. And then that same year, I married my wife. We wanted to get married that year. And we actually, because the courts were closed, we had to go to a judge's house and do it there. Crazy. One day we'll have a real wedding. And then, since that time, I've become a father twice. I've become a professional athlete. There's been all this stuff that's happened in between. And it's just changed my perspective on a lot of this stuff. So, I don't lose any sleep over it. I truly don't. And since I've taken that approach to it, I can drop in and drop out. I'm definitely not a casual fan. I'm very knowledgeable about boxing. I understand every nuance and wrinkle of it. But I will admit, there was, for years, dude, for decades, literally, I didn't miss a single fight. My calendar in my social life was mapped out around boxing, you know. Um, but and that's the cool thing about being single. You could go out on dates on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday night, and watch boxing on Saturday with your main chick. But like, it's different now. And boxing is, when I find time, I watch. But it's got to be something that's worth it. Anyway. Anyway, I'm ranting here. Dan for president, thank you so much. It's an RIP. I appreciate that, brother. Miss him every day, man. Miss him every day. It's hard not to, especially when I got 2 little girls that he never met. He never met his nieces. That is a tragedy. That bothers me so much, but it is what it is. I'm one short Viet. I love that name, dude. He says, could we see Benavidez versus Moses Ituma at heavyweight in 5 to 10 years? Look, dude, anything's possible in boxing. Jake Paul's about to fight Anthony Joshua. So maybe I will be in the ring at some point against Moses Ituma. Who the hell knows? But I'm glad you brought this up, because I saw where Jim Lampley said something about, and I can't quote it, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, like, David Benavidez can move up to heavyweight and give Alexander Usyk a tough fight. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, Jim. Oh my God. Settle down. There's, to answer your question, short Viet, we could. I don't think so. I don't. I think Benavidez is going to be retired in 5 years, certainly 10 years. So I don't think we'll see that. But it's a good tangent. I just, Benavidez, I think that for Jim Lampley to say that, there just seems to be just a complete desperation for the boxing industry to find stars, particularly in America. And this goes back to the point I was making just a minute ago about these cards that, the one we just had, the one that's coming up, about how everyone's talking about these are amazing fight cards, one of the best fight cards of the year. These would be a regular HBO Boxing After Dark show 20, 30 years ago. So it all kind of relates. But the industry is so starved for stars, particularly in America. And the new push is Benavidez. And there's pushes with Devin Haney, Shakur Stevenson, right? Like everyone's. So Devin Haney just had this win over Brian Norman, and everyone's like, oh my God, pound for pound, all-time great. Oh my God. Yeah. Guys, again, look at Brian Norman's resume. Like, how many of you, I get it, Devin Haney lost to Ryan Garcia. He had a really bad fight. He got his ass whooped. Ryan Garcia was on performance-enhancing drugs. How did Ryan Garcia look in his next fight where he was forced to be clean? How do you look? How do you do? Doesn't matter. Ryan Garcia is going to fight for a world title next, and he'll probably win. And we're going to get a rematch between Haney and Garcia, and it's going to be a unification fight at welterweight. That's how bad things have gotten in the American boxing scene. That's how bad things are in the welterweight division right now. That's how weak it is. If that offends you, I'm sorry. But it's true. There is just an utter desperation. So people just slow down. Okay, let this stuff play out. My man Michael Mendiola in the chat, he said Lampley is smoking too much of that San Diego weed. Yeah, dude, maybe some of those San Diego mushrooms. Who the hell knows what else? Because I mean, yeah, it's just people need to very much slow down. It's just everyone jumps the gun. They're so desperate. Dude, let's see how Benavidez does against Zurdo. I think he wins that fight. I think it's going to be really, really fun, action-packed fight. And then let's see if he stays at cruiserweight. Let's see if he fights Opataya. And like, I would here, as an American boxing fan, I'd love to see Benavidez whoop Zerto, and then fight Opataya and whoop him. And maybe before Opataya, he wants to fight a guy like Bradis or somebody like that. I don't know. And like really, really settle in the cruiserweight. But he ends up getting Opataya and beats him, and he becomes the undisputed cruiserweight champion. How awesome would that be? That would be wonderful. It really, really would. That would be a shot in the arm for American boxing. Not only an American undisputed cruiserweight champion, but a Mexican American one. That would be a big deal. That'd be great for the product here in America. But we have a long way to go before that can possibly happen, right? So everybody needs to pump the brakes right now, as I love to say. Dan for president says Crawford was here the entire time, but the media never really seemed to push him. Well, Dan, the boxing media in America is very divided. And you have to remember, dude, Crawford won Fighter of the Year. Going back maybe like a decade, he was Fighter of the Year. He was undisputed at 140. And there were a lot of people in media, myself included, that really, really sung his praises and considered him among the top fighters in the sport, and felt when he moved up to welterweight that he was the number one guy ahead of Spence. But there's also a massive segment of the American boxing press that is directly linked to Al Heyman, and they did not want to give Terrence Crawford credit. It was 100% political. It's because of who Crawford was aligned with promotionally and the platforms he fought on. And they tried to shut the guy out. I mean, that's just, you guys, you truly do not hate the media enough. And I'm not just talking about boxing media, pretty much all media. It is what it is. So it sucks for Crawford. It's nice that he's finally getting his just due. For what it's worth, you guys know this. I said more than a year ago that he beat Canelo, and it comes full circle to what I was talking about at the top of the show about Canelo not being an elite fighter anymore. That's part of why I picked him. And everyone says, "Oh, the size difference." I'm like, wait till you see his two in the ring. Crawford's going to be bigger, taller, stronger, longer, everything. And you saw it. But again, I said it when it wasn't popular or safe to say it. Now, everyone's saying it because it's safe to. It's okay to say it. So I'm glad Crawford's finally getting some recognition, dude. But I got to say, some of us have been recognizing him the whole time. Now, people saying that beating Canelo makes him the greatest fighter of all time. It's because I've seen those posts, and that he's right up there with Sugar Ray Leonard. Okay, that's a bit much. I don't even rate him number one pound for pound right now. I still rate Usyk number one. But yeah, we've been recognizing Bud on this channel for a decade now. Florian in the chat. What's up, man? He says, "Hi, Mr. Montero. Do you know of the Cuban super middleweight Ulysses Iglesias? He looks amazing against medium level opposition." Yeah, I've seen a couple of his fights, but I haven't heard of him lately. What has he been doing lately? Because I did see a couple of his fights, but I want to say it felt like it was years ago, dude. Let me look him up. Now you got me curious, because I felt like it was legitimately years ago, the last time I remember like really paying attention. Yeah, he did fight this year. Oh, he fought Vladimir Shishkin. Yeah, all in Canada, right? So he's a Canadian. He was German-based. Now he's Canadian-based. The problem with him, dude, is like, man, he's a Cuban based in Germany, fighting now mostly out of Canada. How do you promote this guy? He's all over the place. But you're right. He just hasn't faced the top-level opposition. But, he's another one of these Cubans who had a very good amateur career in Cuba, but not necessarily globally. He didn't compete on the global stage. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I don't remember him competing in the Olympics or anything like that. I want to make sure that I'm getting that right. I'm pretty sure he just pretty much fought in Cuba. So I don't know how he's going to fare against the absolute best of the best, but I'm looking at this guy's career. He's been a pro since 2019. He's got 14 fights. You know, he has had one fight this year. He needs to get busier, dude. He needs to get a lot busier. And he's kind of hiding out in Montreal the last few fights, and I just don't know what they're doing with him. But yeah, I do remember the name, and I have seen him fight a couple times. Okay, I'm one short Viet said Benavidez stated Opataya is too strong for him at this moment, but I respect David for admitting that. Okay, well, good on him. Good on him. And if he wants to do this one-off with Zurdo, let's see what happens. And you guys never know. It might go up and fight Zurdo and then come back down and wait and fight Bivol. It could happen. I think that would be more likely than him fighting Opataya at this point. I think that would be more likely. And then I'm one short Viet says, Ring Magazine finally has Canelo off the pound-for-pound top 10. What are your thoughts? Dude, go back and watch the first 20 minutes of the show. I break it all down and give you my thoughts on that very topic. On that note, guys, we got to bounce. Been going here for almost an hour and a half. So I'm going to help my wife get dinner ready for our girls. And then all the other stuff. Bath time, story time, bedtime. And then a little bit of time for me and my wife before we pass out. Okay, guys, have a good one. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll do it again soon. I promise. Peace. See yous at the fight.